We left off looking at this particular code sample. So we typed it into Vim under the file name helloworld.java, compiled it into a helloworld.class, and then ran it by typing java space hello world. But it behooves us, at this point, I think, to start looking just a little bit deeper at what all is going on. So I mentioned that blocks of code, things like classes and methods, if statements and loops, and even switches, are created using pairs of curly braces, and that every time we make a new block of code inside of another block of code, we indent one level deeper. And we can see that in this particular screen. We have our class declaration, which is all the way to the left, our public static void main string args, which is one tab in to the right, and then inside that, our system.println hello world, which is one tab further in. But now let's take a look at what we need with the main method. So when we type the phrase java hello world, what ends up happening is the Java virtual machine looks for our main method, and that's where it starts. For right now, and for the first couple of weeks, all of the programs that we write are only going to have a main method. But after a while, we're going to start being able to write our own methods, and not only that, but we'll be able to split up our programs into multiple classes. And when we talk about big pieces of software, like really big pieces of software, things with millions of lines of code, like Microsoft Word, or Windows, or the software that helps to make sure that all the parts of your car work correctly, we're talking something that might have between 100,000 and 1,000,000 lines of code. And keeping all of that in just one file is going to be pretty difficult to manage, so we break it up. But we've got a little ways before we get there. For right now, just the public static void main string args. And that'll make sure that when we run our files, we know where to start. When you create a main method, we do so like this. We can say public static void main string args, and we can put those square brackets right after the word string, or we can put the square brackets right after the word args. Either way is okay. And later, when we start talking about arrays, we'll understand why it doesn't really matter either way. Okay, so it's Java basics. So every line of code that doesn't open up a code block, that is to say every line of code that isn't immediately followed by a left curly brace, should probably end with a semicolon. It's not quite going to always be the case, but almost all the time. And the stuff between the parentheses, like we see in, for example, this hello world, right? This quotation mark hello world, close quotation mark, we call that the argument of the method. Though on occasion, we call that instead parameters, and that distinction isn't going to matter for another couple of months. Then finally, the compiler mostly ignores white space. There's some things that we definitely have to keep together, but if you want to put a couple of blank lines in your code, the compiler does not care. And in fact, other people who look at your code will probably be thankful. Alright, so there are three different ways that we can print to the screen in this course. There are actually lots and lots of different ways, but in this class we only have three that we're going to use. We have system.out.println, we have system.out.print, and system.out.printf. And these methods vary in a couple of different ways. System.out.println takes whatever is between those parentheses, prints it to the screen, and then moves the cursor down to the next line before it prints anything else. And we saw that with our Hello World program. System.out.print leaves the cursor exactly where it was. And so if we go back to our hello world.java, we can see, in this case, because we use that print line, what's going to happen is after it prints the words hello world, the cursor is going to head right down to the very end. The cursor is going to head right down to the next line, and then we can roll from there. And we see that when we run it. Now let's say we change this. Let's say that instead of using a print line, we just use a print. So you can see how this is going to be different. And then in this case, we'll compile it. Everything's good. We'll run it. And then what we're going to see is hello world, and then right here, where before it got moved down to its own line, in this case the cursor just kept printing. It didn't move down. So the big difference then between the system.out.print and system.out.println is that system.out.println moves down to the next line. System.out.print does not. It leaves the cursor exactly where it is. And there are a couple of escape characters that we can use. And we call them escape characters because they have this this backslash right here, which we call the escape. And what an escape does, what that backslash does, is it tells Java, don't do the thing that you normally do. Instead, do something special. And so if we want to, we can put in a form feed, which moves everything to the top. We could put in a new line character, which makes a new line wherever we want. And we could put in a tab, which is almost like pushing space, but what it does is it moves the text over to the nearest multiple of 8. And so let's play with that just a little bit. We're going to reopen up our Hello World application. Okay, and so we're going to see, let's see what happens when we put, say, a \F right here. And then maybe we can see what happens when we put a \N right there. So in this case, we're going to do a form feed, which is going to move everything up to the top left corner of the screen. And then we're going to put a blank line after we're done printing, using that \N. Or rather, we're going to move down to the next line, I should say. We can save, we can quit, we can compile. And then when we run this, we're going to see a lot of stuff on the screen just bounce right up and to the left, just like so. Now if you're using a Mac, or if you're using a Linux machine, \F, that form feed might not work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, depending on what type of terminal you're using. It can be a little bit persnickety. That's the technical term. But if you're using PuTTY, it'll always work, and it's generally a good practice. Now this is almost the same as if we typed the word clear in the console. Is when we go up, everything is still there. But after we scroll down to the bottom, it's all just disappeared. Now let's take a look at what happens when you put a tab in here. So I'm just going to put a tab right there. And what we're going to see here is that we create a little bit more space. And the really cool thing about the tab is that it lets us align things really precisely. So we don't have to count spaces. We just have to make sure that we have a tab for every 8 characters rounded up that we want to move. Okay, so we'll compile again. javac hello world.java. javac is just the Java compiler. And then we'll run it. And you can see how there's all that space right here. And that's a tab. That's what the tab does. It moves over until it's got some multiple of 8, and then it starts printing again. Okay, so these are the basics of printing. And if you want, we can play with this a little bit more. So we can add, for example, another line, system.out.println, 2 tabs. Hello world, I hope you're having a great day. We can save, we can compile, we can run, and we'll see this, hello world, and then over here, that's 2 tabs worth. So the first tab ends right before that W, and the second tab ends over here. So this is 16 characters over. I hope you're having a great day. We're going to end right here, and we'll pick back up with variables and data types. We'll talk about strings and integers, and we'll talk about more printing using printf. We'll also talk about some more of the escape sequences. See you in a bit.